Well, if you were tuned in late last month, you had an opportunity to have a listen to some of the fishery management folks from across the province talk about, perhaps some changes coming up in the 2021 fishing regulations, and also be all ears in terms of your suggestions. And it's a real pleasure to once again welcome Kayedon Wilcox. He's the Northwest Regional Fisheries Manager from Alberta Environment and Parks. Kayedon, thanks so much again for taking some time.
Thanks, Michael. I'm glad to be here.
So this was a bit of a difference in the sense that folks were not able to meet in person with fishery biologists and fishery managers like they did, I guess, 2019, 2020, no, 2019, yeah. And because of the COVID situation. So you held a series of webinars. How did it go?
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. On the in-person pieces that we would have typically had kind of pre-COVID, that were planned for prior to COVID being a big part of our lives here. So yeah, as an alternative way to do that without having to bring people together, being honorable to the AHS restrictions that are out there, people's safety being our key peace of mind here. We did host 7 webinars over the last couple weeks through January. So those started off on January 14th, went to January 27th. I'd say overall, Michael, very successful. I was happy that we had some really great numbers throughout the sessions. I was a little bit anxious and trepid when we started this route of these webinars, understanding that it was new for us. It was heavily technology based in some ways, and there was a lot of other things that were on people's mind that we were competing with a little bit. But we did have great numbers. Michael, just to give you a sense of, and we can chat about that certainly, is I think our final numbers in terms of attendees these past couple of weeks was approximately 1,900 people attended those 7 sessions. That was out of about 4,000 folks that registered. So we had a really good uptake of those that were registered and were able to actually participate. And that kind of compares to those 14 in-person engagement sessions we held about a year prior, where we had just over 1,200 people actually show up to in-person. So it actually exceeded those numbers last year, which was, I think, a bit of a baseline for us that way. So.
And in terms of the information that, as I understand, it was a bit of a two-way. You guys were able to present some potential new information, and at the same time, the participants were able to get some of their concerns, questions, comments to you.
Yeah, I'm sure for a lot of folks that would be new to the process, they would, it was that type of engagement, a little bit of back and forth. I knew going in that we were going to have some numbers based on the pre-registration. So, we weren't able to open up that to sort of a live voice conversation in terms of some back and forth with that. So we did have to, in order to just try to get to as many folks' questions as possible, kind of limit that to a Q&A through chat, but live response from our subject matter experts through a panel environment where we had a number of subject matter experts from different parts of the department be able to come in and address those questions live with folks. So I think that worked pretty well. There was a variety of topics. A lot of that was based upon some things we'd heard from the information sessions from previous years. So there was some aspects related to introducing folks to the fisheries management cycle. We did want to hear back on our special harvest license program, which we got some really great responses on. We wanted to update folks on the harvest slot limits and native trout recovery programs that were going on. And then the ones that happened in the second week, which were more regional based, really allowed us to go into some of the proposals that we had on some of the regional specific water bodies and regulations that a lot of folks were obviously interested in from year to year.
So just kind of taking a little bit from what you mentioned there, was there an overarching theme in terms of the comments that came to you, if you were to classify that?
I guess the quick themes that might come to mind, Michael, are certainly there was some folks that were interested in all topics. We had a number of folks that were able to tune in for many of the sessions. I think what we saw was continued support for the harvest slot program that was implemented. Some questions as to what might be some of the next steps. How are we evaluating that? Where might that program go in the future? I think what we also saw from there was aspects related to on the topic of special harvest licenses. Certainly what we've heard in person a little bit, which was, how can we improve access to special harvest licenses for folks? How might we share that more broadly? And then maybe just kind of a takeaway on that, as always, is we certainly do get a diversity on regulation proposals. So we try to provide as many options as we can within what the fishery can sustain, and we always get a lot of feedback on that. And I think generally on the sessions, maybe the theme was, Michael, I think overall very supportive. I think on some exit surveys we held, about 3/4 of people indicated that they really enjoyed and got something out of the sessions, and kind of that same way in regards to, would you do it again, and does this venue kind of work for you? Is, we got about 3/4 of that, and of course we knew that wasn't going to satisfy everyone who really wants the opportunity to talk face to face with a biologist at times. But I think one of our themes out of there really was an introduction to, here's the folks that are helping manage those fisheries from GOA, and follow up with them. They're happy to pick up the phone, answer calls in relation to some of those proposals. So the webinars is by no means the only way to get your questions and input heard. So.
Yeah, I do want to come back to how folks can still participate in the process. But before I do that, just before Christmas, I believe, Alberta Environment Parks Minister Jason Nixon put out a media release, talked a lot about the introduction of new potential fish hatcheries and folks that want to make bring on board more hatchery fish, stocked lakes. Was that a topic that was raised during your conversations with folks?
Yeah, actually, that's a really great point, Michael. And certainly one of those themes that did come out, which was, where is Alberta going with stocking? We did have to put a hold on walleye stocking this past year, even though we were able to deliver pretty much fully on our trout stocking program. We did indicate in the sessions that we are planning to reinitiate those walleye stocking activities for this spring. Get walleye eggs into our fish culture system. Our fish culture manager, Craig Copeland, was in almost all of the sessions, and it was good. As you mentioned, Michael, he provided some updates on our facilities that have expanded, our capabilities in many ways. And so I think, this year we are looking forward to that. We believe it's going to be a big part of our program. It was supposed to be last year, of course. And you're right. We got, I think, encouragement to continue that. And it's always cool, Michael, because you're probably never surprised to hear about the types of species folks put up and say, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And truly, there's fish species that come forward that even I haven't heard of. So it can be pretty interesting.
Yeah, indeed. I've got a pretty long list of folks that have written in and suggested, hey, ask about this. I get, good on them, because I mean, it does keep the whole process of engagement and people looking for some interesting fishing opportunities. And speaking of engagement, there is still an opportunity. Time is getting short, however, but folks can interact with you through a survey.
Yeah, that's correct. And so one of the things where we're gathering the majority of our input on the regulation proposals themselves, Michael, those could be water body based. It's also on our special harvest license program as well. We do have an online survey that we're pointing folks to during the webinars. That survey does close February 8th at 9 a.m. So folks do have about 3 or 4 days to still identify their preferences for some of the regulation options that are on the table. We are still running our what we're calling our Ask the Expert section as well. So folks are able to provide questions in if they'd like a biologist or another expert to answer some of the questions, and that will also run through, although right to the 8th. Although, as mentioned, is there's never a bad time to ask a question to Fish and Wildlife on any of those questions. But thanks, Michael. That's a great reminder for folks.
Are there any, I guess, special considerations? I know, we're getting close to the release of the 2021 fishing regulations end of March. But is there anything that you could sort of give us a heads up on in terms of something that folks should be looking forward to or be aware of?
So so that's good, Michael. I always appreciate the spoiler alert on those. I think some of the things that we did here, just kind of looking through some of the information and some of the input we have, is, I think there are some areas where that we can improve and enhance our special harvest license based on some of the questions that were asked. I'm hoping that we can implement some of those as early as this 2021 fishing season. And I think overall, we certainly heard support again for providing harvest opportunities where we can, and I think that's being reflected on lakes and water bodies where folks were having that option. Going forward. So I do expect to see some more harvest opportunities on the landscape this year, some changes with SHL. And I think the one thing that, that was provided through some of that is there were also some areas where we will have to address conservation requirements. And I think what we'll see with those is probably some areas and some water bodies that are popular to folks. That's that comes with part and parcel sometimes with the need for some further restrictions on some of those popular water bodies where folks might see regulation changes that are going to be a little bit lessened this year and give some time and space for recovery of those populations.
That kind of plays into the whole reveal that we saw a 30% increase in the number of anglers in 2020. And so obviously that does put, to some degree, some pressure on certain species of fish.
Yeah, no question, Michael. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. And, I think we spent some time on some of the sessions over the past couple of weeks identifying that with folks. And it actually was a question that came up multiple times as well is, what does that kind of impact have on fisheries? And certainly, as we know, there's a finite number of, of that resource. Now we're just sharing it amongst more. That typically can have an impact in regards to how do we allocate that, that population or that small resource out to the broader few. I think the encouragement is there's lots of folks getting outdoors. They're taking more interest and I hope as well stewardship values outside of that, et cetera. And I think in the survey we are seeing that. We're seeing a lot of folks understand some of those trade-offs, Michael, and indicating that we know that there's going to be places where we won't be able to maybe harvest a fish, maybe even this year, et cetera. But I think what we're certainly trying to do is really not limit participation. We do want to have folks enjoy going out there. We want to educate them on fish handling, fish identification, et cetera, so they can really have the best experience as possible out there for sure. It's something we're going to keep track of, and I think everybody's calling it the fishing COVID effect. So I expect some of our monitoring this year when folks see us out there, I hope it'll be, getting a sense of, is that 30% here to stay? Is it here to build? Or would we see some retraction of that?
Well, lots of stuff to look forward to, I think, Kayedon, and we thank you so much for your time. I guess the final thing that I'd like to ask you is the public consultation sessions, as far as you can predict, do you feel it's something that is going to happen again in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I would say no question about that for sure, Michael. I think what our staff would like to do, and I think what a number of anglers indicated is they still do want some of that in-person engagement. We hope to do that lakeside this year through some of our monitoring efforts and programs, and then I think as we go back and look at some of the input this year and think about our regulations for 2022, that aspect of in-person and this webinar technique, I think as well, really identified that there are a number of folks that prefer this method, would like to continue to be engaged on that. So I think we just added another tool in our toolbox here, Michael. So really appreciate you spending time with me here today too. It's always fun. So,
well, thank you, sir. And hopefully we see you out in the lake or on a river sometime in the near future, Kayedon.
Ditto. Thanks, Michael.